Hello, how are you doing? I hope all is well. As you can see, you are very much getting the fresh-faced, probably not that fresh-faced version of me. Dripping wet hair, no makeup, may have to feed my baby in the middle of it, but we will see how we go. I've had lots of epiphanies over the last few weeks. Hello. So I had my baby last Tuesday, and I just wanted to share a few things whilst they were fresh in my mind and whilst I was in it. Sometimes when I hear stories online, thanks for joining, by the way. Sometimes when I hear stories online, I feel like things are so far removed. Hi, Katie. And I'm recording as a podcast as well, so I won't share your comments too much, but if you've got any questions, let me know, and I won't mention your name in case it goes out on the podcast, if you want to be anonymous in that way. But yeah, sometimes I hear so many of these entrepreneurial stories, and the reality of where they were just seems so far. So even though this is super fresh and we're still on kind of day 9 since she was born, I thought I would share a few things. Do not worry, I'm not going to share some kind of labour story and make this about having a baby. But it certainly has brought up a lot of things in terms of a life change. And I talk about this a lot in terms of what people are talking about online, as in this dream life, and we're doing this and we're smashing it and we're hustling and all of these sorts of things. And sometimes that can be inspiring and motivating and brilliant, but sometimes also behind the scenes, it's maybe not a reflection of what is going on for people, as in they have other things, they have other commitments. The amount of times when I work with clients that sometimes that value system or that thing that they're looking to grow and build and work on needs to work based on their current life situations as well. So maybe they're looking after an elderly parent or young children, or maybe they're still in a 9 to 5 and they need to make it work. So I'm going to be sharing a few points with you today that will hopefully help you in your business. I'm also recording as a podcast, so you will see it later on. So if you do need to hop off at any point, feel free to do so. But I will crack on. Grab a piece of paper and a pen also if you like. This is clearly not like these are the things that you should do, but they may prompt a few thoughts along the way. Okay, number 1, change will bring up all of the fields. All of the feels. The first sort of few months of my pregnancy, I was really sick and just really ill and kind of going step by step. And then I had this lovely chunk in the middle where I felt really good and I felt energized. And slowly but surely, as the reality started to come closer and closer, I was feeling all the feels. And I think sometimes this happens when we're moving into a new phase of our business, or we're being bold and we're trying to launch something, or we want to go in a different direction. And sometimes that sense of people saying to you, just think positively, or it will be okay, or don't worry about it, doesn't actually help you. And feeling all of the feels is no bad thing, and really figuring out why you're feeling that, or maybe trying to figure out, is this a pattern of behavior that pops up to say hello again, and really sort of getting to know those feelings and sort of look at them rather than just try and squash them down and not even acknowledge that they're there. The second thing that's been really key for me, and it was a very conscious decision based on where I'm at right now, but also based on my first baby, boundaries for my own self-care have been really key. And again, this applies to business. When we're going to the next step, we have to really nurture ourselves and put ourselves first in that way that we have to keep ourselves up. I know so many of us have caring responsibilities as well, but what can happen is that slice of pie that is solely for you can very easily, unless we consciously have a look at it, can get eaten up by other people along the way. For example, having Luna, it was that thing of I don't want loads of people in the hospital. I don't want loads of people sitting on my sofa on day 3. I don't want people coming to stay and me feeling like, I mean, I've clearly not put on a show for you, but like feeling like I have to do all of the things or rush through them. And bizarrely, this time I feel much more, I think because Luna is very chilled and much more of a sleeper. She had her dad's patterns, probably much more than me. The transition has been much easier, but still I do think that is coupled with going slowly but surely. So I guess boundaries for your own self-care can sometimes in business be those things of not sharing everything. Not sharing everything with everybody, not allowing people's permission to affect how you move forward. For example, when I had my first son, a member of my family was making tea in the kitchen and then kind of came through and she said, "Oh, just to let you know, I rearranged your mug cupboard because I thought the mugs would work better in this kind of way." And you can't see me if you're listening to this as a podcast, but I remember kind of doing a slow sort of turn to the side of like, I like my mugs where they are, thank you. But I think sometimes as well, when you're in that head down, vulnerable situation, people can use it as an opportunity to kind of sweep in and, you know, maybe they feel that they're being helpful. But actually you need to know in terms of your own self-care of what you need, what boundaries you need to set. I know, tell me about it. Don't touch the mugs, man. But it was that moment of me realizing that unless I took responsibility, the mug cupboard, right, unless I took responsibility for myself and I put those in place, people weren't necessarily going to understand that. So it comes up time and time again of your boundaries for your own self-care. And I know what we can all be like sometimes. We'll put it down to like, oh, it's fine, oh well, they're only staying an hour, or it will be okay, or I want to be a nice person. And you can be all of those things. But I know for myself, if I've got a bit more wiggle room, if I've got a bit more wiggle room, I can actually show up in the way that I want to. So that's been really useful. The third thing I wanted to share is about managing your expectations rather than fulfilling other people's. And again, this is about your own boundaries and really checking in with yourself and thinking about actually what you need. Bizarrely, and I shared a bit of this on our stories last night. Matt and I did a speaking event. Now, I'm sure people saw me talking about this and go, oh my God, she's bloody mad. What's she doing? She had a baby last week and she's doing this speaking event. But the truth was, it was something that we felt that we could do together. We co-hosted it together. We could take Luna. She literally just slept the whole time. It was a very comfortable setting. We were able, it was very informal. So it was literally just sitting on these amazing sort of plush sofas and all the rest of it. And it was for 45 minutes. So it wasn't like I was flying to America, leaving my baby, being jet lagged or anything like that. It was something that we consciously thought about. And we thought about all the implications, and obviously we put things in place, like had things not gone smoothly last week with the birth or with me, then we would obviously have made different arrangements, but it really worked for us. And also it was a lovely financial gig as well. Let's just be honest about these things. You know, there is sometimes this pressure that we feel like we should just pick and choose, or we do things when we feel that we're ready, but we all have bills to pay at the same time as well. And it was interesting in terms of my own expectations that sometimes when people take maternity leave, and this is what I was sharing last night, is that sometimes there's this thing that suddenly you should just watch daytime TV all day. Well, I watched a bit of daytime TV on Monday and I was just like, what is this drivel? And every advert is full of debt repayment things, people who are ill with cancer, sadly, diet supplements, plastic surgery, you know, just a bit here, just a bit there. And I just found it really depressing. And again, in terms of your own expectations, there has to be a big emphasis in terms of your business or your brand that it has to feel really good to you, because otherwise you're just trying to live vicariously or kind of follow what everybody else is doing, and that can be really stressful and complicated sometimes. Hello, thanks for joining. Okay, so the next thing is about really creating your own way of working. This has been a really good way of checking in of how I work. Sometimes there can be this temptation to be doing all of the things and getting caught in your emails, getting stuck in your inbox, chatting or being in groups or networking. And you have to be really discerning about whether you're working hard or whether you're working smartly, and why are you doing what you do. And every step of the way, I've really been thinking about this, especially at moments in my pregnancy where I had very little energy, or towards the end I was feeling really tired. I had to really tune in to, is this going to push my business forward? Am I actually going to do something here? Is it going to be useful or not? And also thinking about whether this is something for right now. I actually did a book writing course back in May, and it was fantastic. And I suddenly put all this pressure on myself that I had to get a book deal before I had my baby. And it suddenly became really apparent that that was not going to happen. And that wasn't necessarily the right thing for then. Even though I set it as a goal, like, yeah, I'm going to do that and this is going to happen, it wasn't the right time. And that book will materialize as and when it's supposed to. But in the meantime, there had to be that focus on the clients and the commitments and projects that I had already. The next thing, passive income. Oh my goodness. Again, it has to be much more apparent in terms of the culture that we don't have to do everything one-to-one, and having different income streams is really important, and sowing seeds all the time is really crucial in terms of growing your business. So I've mentioned this before during my son's labour, that I sold 2 books. Well, during the course I went, Luna was born at 9:24 in the morning on Tuesday, and then I came home Wednesday afternoon. And I'll probably do a post about this, but during that time I sold a couple of courses, I had a couple of client inquiries, somebody invited me to be on their podcast, somebody launched some collaboration that I'd done. And it was a real reminder that there are always things in the mix, and behind the scenes I'm always planting and nurturing all of those things all of the time, rather than just kind of letting them go, but making things available so people can experience what they need to or get the value that I needed to. And I think also as well, we can assume that passive income is some sort of weird sleazy term, or it's going to be really complicated in terms of technology, and it really isn't. There will be a way that can work for you. So whether that's an audio download or a miniature ebook, or I don't know, a bigger course or a workshop, there's so many things that you can share and that people will be so grateful for. And I know there's an emphasis on premium pricing, and that, you know, unless you're in it and you've paid a huge amount of money, you're not invested. I really don't think that's true. I think the investment in your business always has to start with your head, that you are dedicating your time and your effort and your decision to actually do this, rather than going, well, unless I've spent 10 grand on something, I'm not going to be investing. Because sometimes that can be the case, that it actually freezes people and stifles them, because it's just too much, that they're like, oh my God, I've invested all this money, I've got to make it work, but I'm not sure if it's the right fit. And the person on the phone who was selling it to me was really convincing, and the fear can really get in the way. Also, making sure there is an emphasis on money making tasks. This has to be key in terms of your business. You are a business. And I had a client recently who was talking about the framework of her Instagram, and she was saying, but is it okay to say that I do that because I don't want to come across as being really salesy and, too like open for business. And I had to remind her that she was a business and that was okay. There's a manner and there's a tone that will work really well in terms of her connecting with her audience. But I think, again, it can have that emphasis on making graphics, or like with my first pregnancy, I was doing a lot of faffing and fiddling around with paragraphs and making things that really beautiful on my website. Whereas actually there has to be that kickstart into sharing what it is that you do and focusing on money making activities and making offers and putting yourself out there and all that good stuff. Next, I want you to think about how you can show up in terms of alignment with your circumstances. Visibility is absolutely key in terms of growing your business. And there are times where I'm really good at it in terms of putting my face on the internet. And then there are times like this year where I have fallen off the wagon a little bit, or I've been sharing things that have maybe been a little bit safe because that's been the headspace that I've been in. And I think sometimes you have to really encourage yourself to do it, because there will always be some kind of reason or excuse that you can use which will prevent you from showing up and talking about your business, because it is triggering. It can be difficult to be there in the way that you want to be. So thinking about how you can show up. So for example, I'm showing up today, I'm doing a live, but also I'm recording it as a podcast. I've got my microphone here as well. So not that I'm saying I'm killing two birds with one stone by any means, because that's just a horrible phrase, but really thinking about how you can maximize your time and how you can share much more of your audience. So for example, I don't know if you've noticed on Instagram, but I've been sharing a lot of my old podcast episodes on IGTV. And it's been really fascinating because it's opened up a whole new audience to my podcast, and it's been really nice, especially for new listeners or people who have been listening for less time, where they've said, oh, I didn't know that you had that person on. So I think it's about really honouring the content that you have already and mixing and matching it and making it work for you. You know, you might have written that amazing blog post or done a video about something, and you released it once and then that was kind of it. You put it on your blog and it's maybe staying there. But have a think about the pieces within that you can share and repurpose in a different way, or tell the story adding a new layer or a new dimension to it. People want to hear from you. People want to hear things, and they may have missed it, and we're not assuming that everybody is reading everything that we're doing, because people are online at different times. And especially if you've worked really hard to create that content, don't be afraid to share it in that way. Where are you reinventing the wheel unnecessarily? Again, I see this so often. Everything being really tailored before they even press publish. So sometimes people will go, right, I want to be in the press and I want to approach 9 different journalists. So I'll spend an hour on each devising the perfect pitch. Now, there's a fine line here. I do think you have to have an investment of time and energy and really thinking about how you can make things tailored, because again, there's nothing worse. Hello, thanks for joining. There's nothing worse than receiving a blanket email. We know we've all received that. I shared something the other day about how somebody approached me on LinkedIn, and it was all like, "Hi Nikki, let's connect, let's do this and this," and I was like, oh no, like this Alan, I think he was called Alan, why have you just copied and pasted that? Because I can just read straight through it. It's so obvious in that way. But I think sometimes what happens is people invest a lot of the time early doors before they even know if somebody's interested. So what I would do in terms of, maybe if it's like a pitching to journalists or reaching out to people, is do an individual paragraph to somebody, but have those things that are a backup that you can always do. So I share quite often with my clients my press pack that I send out, or my portfolio. I created this PDF which has all the speaking things that I do. So if ever like anybody approaches me about a speaking event, it's like a brochure. It's like an old-fashioned brochure. You know, when you kind of go to golf clubs, it's like, we have an 18-hole golf club, we have a bar and restaurant, we have conservatory seating. It's kind of like that for my own speaking. So it shares the topics that I talk about, and even though that took a lot of time in that instance, once it was done, it was done. And I've had that with a few people, a few brands recently, where they want to have examples. And every time, I don't want to be carving out new things. So really thinking about, where can you invest the time? So once it's done, it's done. Hello. Okay. Good enough is good enough. I see this again all the time, of feeling like we're not quite ready. We're not ready to do it. And so we ended up doing more research, and people are paying you to get the project done or to receive the service. They're not necessarily paying for you to go, oh my goodness, well, they've paid me for an hour's work, but I'm going to do loads of extra research and over deliver on this. Now, there is a fine line of making sure that your talents and your skills are up to scratch and all the rest of it. But once they are, and once you have learnt those things, reflect that in your pricing. My pricing when I first began was much lower than it is right now, because I'm now at the stage where I've coached over 1,000 people. My formula is tried and tested, and my prices will reflect that, and they will go up again, because every time I get better or I work with more people, I shortcut that process for people. And time is most people's greatest asset, I guess. And we're all looking for the solution. We're looking to get from A to B really quickly. And something, just going back to passive income, for example, that's why I wrote my book for actors, because I knew that I could sell a lower cost product and people could connect with it. Hello, thanks for joining. They could connect with it. Whereas if I sat down and I shared all this information one-to-one, because it required me, it was going to be a much more expensive service, if that makes sense. So really make sure that you're not giving all of the things before you've actually been paid. And again, this has been really clear over the last few months. Everybody wants to have a coffee with you. Everybody wants to have a chat with you. Have you got 10 minutes on the phone? And quite often, unless you're really strict with your own boundaries, it's going to turn into 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it might be. And I think you can just really reassess your boundaries every step of the way. I've said boundaries a lot today, haven't I? The last thing is, good enough is good enough. And even today, when I was thinking about doing this, and I really wanted to do it today because it was fresh in my head. If you just joined, I was saying at the beginning that sometimes when I see these stories online, the person that I see in front of me on the sales page or whatever it might be can sometimes feel so far removed from the person that they were, that it almost just feels a bit unbelievable. Like, really? They were living like on a skip and now they're living in a castle? I'm not quite sure, because there is this sense, especially, and I've been to a lot of speaking events and things like that, where I've sat in the audience, and even though that person is telling their story, there's a sense that they're removed from it. So they just say generic things like, we'll just think positively, or you just got to take the knockback sometimes. And I felt like that a little bit today, because I was like, I know that we've got a full-on day today. We had a late night last night. I knew I wanted to have a sleep this morning, and we're registering our daughter's birth this afternoon. So there's lots of things in the mix. But equally, I knew that the need to share this information was more than me having a perfect blow dry or a face full of makeup. And that sentence of good enough is good enough is sometimes enough. And I think we can all press pause on things like we won't make that video, or we won't do a creative project because we don't want to be the one who does X, Y, and Z. This came up in this talk that we did last night, which was titled Movies and Manhood. And we were talking about how men show up in films and the physical representation and what that says about society. And it was a really interesting, diverse chat. But one thing that I came up with was, there was a mate of Matt's that I see from time to time. I've been with Matt for 12 years. This guy is still writing his film. Every time I see him, he's like, yeah, I'm writing my film, mate. Yeah, it's going really well. Yeah. And I'm all for taking your time and making it the best that it can be. But there's something in that, and maybe I recognize this because I'm a coach, there's something in that there where there's a block, or there's something that's getting in the way of that person actually taking action, or pulling it together so it's at a point where investors could read it, or actors could do a round table read. And there's something in there, because maybe they are waiting for everything to be perfect, or whether perfection is showing up as procrastination, which again can very easily be done. So I want you to check yourself before you wreck yourself. I think I'm too old to say that phrase about good enough is good enough. Yes, of course, it works well to be professional and do what you need to do. But sometimes it can just be that perfect nugget to share with somebody at the right time, and exactly what that person needs. And knowing what you have to say is actually full of value, and that you're ready now to do that. And we were giving this example the other day that not everybody needs Richard Branson as their mentor. For example, I have it may all change next week, but I have no plans at this stage to start an airline, for example. So of course, if Richard Branson came to North London, I'd probably go to the talk and pick up a few things, but the advice that he would probably have wouldn't be specific enough for me to take action. And I think sometimes people can feel in this vein, especially in their business or their brand, where they feel like they're not expert enough, or they feel like they're just starting out, or they're only slightly ahead of the curve or the person that they're serving. That's okay. You don't have to have all of the things, as long as you're managing those expectations. Like, for example, I don't talk about having $1 million business. I don't have $1 million business. So I have no business talking in that way. When I do, I'll share all the good stuff with you. But I think for now, it's about showing what you've done and where you can help, and how you can really be the best that you can be and serve your customers or your clients in the way that you want to. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to write them in the comments, or you can DM me as well. Likewise, if you're listening to this on the podcast, I always love hearing where you're listening and what you're doing. And I love that interaction if anything has resonated for you, and what you're going to work on going forward. I think, again, it is there is this emphasis on the perfect time sometimes. And I don't actually buy into people going, just do it now, you'll figure it out, because sometimes there is a better time. Like the day before I had my baby, I wasn't thinking about, building a product line. I was not in that headspace. So even though people might say, well, there's no time like the present, like crack on, put a positive mindset on, there is sometimes a better time, and that's okay as well, and that's all good too. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope you've got something. If you don't want to comment publicly, that's absolutely fine. And feel free to DM me or email me. They're always open. I'd love just to hear your thoughts of anything that resonated. Also, as well, if you feel somebody needs to hear this, please share it, tag me, and all that good stuff. And I will see you very soon. I thought Luna would come in at this point, but she's maybe gone back to sleep. So there we go. But anyway, thank you so much. I will see you in a bit. Bye.